Hello, I'm Charles Hubble, your host and narrator for our podcast series, Deceived, the Moo Years. Deceived, the Moo Years is the true story of one young man's compelling, at times terrifying, former involvement with the martial arts cult Chung Moo Kwan.
The following story you are about to hear is true. It took place between 1980 and 1996. Most of the names have been changed. There are other versions of the story. My name is Russell Johnson, and this one is mine.
Deceived, the Moo Years, Episode 8. From the beginning of Russell's training in school, he heard that Master Kim had the power to heal, and that he had a medical doctor's degree. Russell watched as Aden performed acupressure, knowledge that he believed Master Kim had passed on to Aden. Keith told of an instructor in the Chicago area who'd been dying in the hospital with some mysterious disease that most assumed was cancer. All the doctors were in the hospital room surrounding the instructor when Master Kim entered. When he saw Master Kim, the instructor tried to get up from his deathbed to bow, but Master Kim told him to stay down. Master Kim made all the doctors leave the room, even though they disagreed wildly. A short time later, Master Kim opened the door to announce the instructor had been cured. The doctors were amazed and bewildered.
Some students have been told that John C. Kim, the school's founder, has secret powers.
It was said that he had a lot of healing powers, that he could essentially heal anything.
On Friday night, May 8, 1987, head instructor Keith Brown stepped out, leaving Russell in charge. On the desk, he left a list of things for Russell to take care of. It was Russell's second week learning to handle school. He had not yet earned the opportunity to sit behind the desk. Russell was told never to go behind the desk unless he had permission. If he did, he was only to go into drawers for which he was given permission. He was never to read anything left on the desk. That night, Russell saw a note on the desk. He didn't read it because it was turned away from his side of the desk, and because he felt it was a part of Keith's personal notes, and reading it would have gone against what he'd been told. When Russell went in on Monday at 4:30 p.m., Keith seemed to be upset with him for some reason. He told Russell to go inside, change into his uniform, and do 100 push-ups. After that, he was to do Tong Nong for 25 minutes. Tong Nong is an ocean form. It comes from the power of the ocean waves and its fluid motion. According to the Moo, the breathing control that is developed through this form increases oxygen flow throughout the body, promoting a radiant and youthful condition. Russell did not know why he was doing the push-ups, but felt it was for a good reason. At that time, Russell was very serious about the opportunity to learn how to run a school. This was something he had wanted for 7 years. When he did the push-ups, he was only able to do about 50 good ones. During the last 50, he felt a lot of pain. He blocked it out by thinking about the opportunity he had. He completed his instructions, not wanting to lose that opportunity. Unlike when Russell did Chung Moo Kwan push-ups in the past, this time he was not allowed to warm up his muscles. It cannot be overemphasized that warming up properly prevents or reduces risk of injury. Warming up has several benefits, including preparing the body and mind for strenuous activity.
I would compare what happened to my arms that day to a rubber band. If you were to take a rubber band and you place it in the freezer and then you take it out and you try to stretch it, it's going to break. But if you take that same rubber band, you warm it up in a little water, it's going to stretch. And the same thing happened to my muscles. They were cold and they broke.
After doing the push-ups and Tong Nong, Keith called him into the office and asked if he knew why he had to do the push-ups. Russell didn't. Keith said it was because he left a note of everything that Russell was supposed to do. Russell explained that he did see the note, but didn't read it because it was turned away from him, and Keith had told him not to go to the other side of the desk. Keith said that was the right way to handle the situation. Instructors had told Russell many times that, when in doubt, don't. Keith got into a conversation with Russell about the important responsibility of handling school, and that was the reason for the push-ups. Later that night, Russell's arms began to swell. Soon, he was unable to bend his arms. The pain was so overwhelming that he was unable to sleep. The next day, Russell was still unable to bend his arms. Keith and Russell had dinner in the school's office. They laughed about the times when Keith did so many push-ups that he couldn't bend his arms. He would have to put his hands on the sink and bend his body forward to wash his face. Keith said he'd never have Russell do anything that he hadn't done himself. When they ate dinner that night, Russell had to put his food on the desk and push his face into it so he could eat. That night, he was again unable to sleep and had to keep his arms in the air as he lay in bed. The next day, Russell went to school at noon. He felt something was wrong. Keith had never seen anyone's arms so pumped up. He agreed that something was wrong, so he called National Instructor Jared, who told him to press on the pressure points in Russell's arms. When that didn't work, Keith called Jared again. Jared didn't take Keith's concern seriously. Russell would have to wait for help until Friday, when National Instructor Jordan was in town. Russell stayed in school until 8 p.m. before going home to take a hot bath, hoping to relieve the pain. Russell also asked Assistant Instructor Whitney Davidson to put mineral ice on his arms, but that didn't work either. That night, he was again unable to sleep. This was his third consecutive night without sleep, so around 3 a.m., Russell decided to go to the hospital. He was unable to tolerate the pain and the lack of sleep any longer.
The pain that night was unbearable. My arms were so swollen, I couldn't lay them down beside me, so I had to hold them up straight in front of me. At this point, there was pain in my kidneys, and I didn't know it at the time, but my kidneys were shutting down and I was dying.
He would go to the hospital without telling the school, because he didn't want them to think he didn't trust their word. If they believed Russell didn't trust them, he would lose his opportunity to learn how to run a school.
It was 3 a.m., and I couldn't take the pain anymore. I just wanted to make it a couple more days until National Instructor Jordan could look at me.
All he wanted was some pain pills to help him make it until Friday. When he got to the hospital, the emergency room doctor told him he had Compartment Syndrome, a life-threatening condition which occurs after an injury, when there is insufficient blood supply to muscle or nerves due to increased pressure within one of the body's compartments. The muscles in his arms were not getting oxygen, causing the tissue to die. Dead muscle tissue was going into his kidneys, which meant his kidneys would become permanently damaged. They said that they needed to cut his arms open to release the pressure, or he risked amputation, maybe even death.
When they told me that I was dying, I had this vision of being buried in my Chimaquan uniform with Master Kim's picture on my back. Now looking back, knowing that Kim was a psychopathic monster, I could only compare it to a victim of rape or some other horrific crime having their attacker on their back.
When they told him this, he tried to leave, but they wouldn't let him. He still believed the school could help him. Russell wouldn't sign the release form until the school approved it. He told the hospital to call his roommate, James Holt, and to tell him to call Keith. James arrived at the hospital first. When Keith arrived at the hospital, Russell told the doctors Keith was his brother. Our family doctor was in Chicago, Russell explained, and wouldn't let them operate until Keith said it was all right. When he first saw Keith, Russell was laying down and tried to sit up to bow to show Keith that he still had faith in the school. Keith told him to stay down.
I had heard the story of John C. Kim healing the instructor in the hospital many times before, and from Keith. Part of the story was that Kim entered the room, the instructor was lying in his deathbed, and he tried to get up to bow to Kim. So when Keith came to the hospital, I tried to get out of my bed to bow to him, because that's how the story was told.
Keith talked with the doctors to find out what was going on. He told them that he'd call the family doctor. The hospital said that they would talk to the family doctor if it would help. Russell thought that if he did die, he wanted to be buried in his Chungmuquan uniform. When Keith talked to the national instructors, they said let them operate, since Russell was already at the hospital. When Keith told him, Russell signed the release form immediately. The hospital wanted to call the rest of his family, but Russell wouldn't let them. It was after 3 a.m., and they couldn't do anything but worry. The doctors were unsure of the severity of the damage, and Russell worried that he would come out of surgery with his arms amputated. When Russell awoke from surgery, Keith was the first person he saw. Still drugged, he tried to sit up and bow again, to show Keith that his feelings were the same. Keith said that it was okay not to bow. He said he'd be back to check on Russell, but he never returned. Except for Murphy, none of the instructors came to visit Russell while he was in the hospital. They would call occasionally to see if there was anything that he needed, but they never visited. Only assistants did. Russell felt they were either distancing themselves from him or were otherwise ordered not to come. Russell's mother and family were very upset at the school and wanted him out. They wanted him to sue, but he was having none of that.
As a student, I was told how instructors had in the school what they called true care feelings towards students. Like they cared about you more than your own friends and family did. But in 16 days, only one instructor visited me in the hospital. With all the conditioning for me to respond to Keith's commands, he never returned.
In 1997, Russell's mom, Arlene Bruns, was interviewed by Martial Arts Professional magazine. She vividly remembered the day she got the call that her son was critically injured. "I wanted him to quit right away," she said. "His arms were so bad, they were awful." She hadn't always been critical of Chung Moo Kwan. She was grateful to them for helping to keep Russell on the straight and narrow. Then, that began to change. She and his brothers thought his instructors had too much control over Russell. One brother flat out told Russell that Chung Moo was some kind of cult. Mrs. Bruns was upset about Russell losing his car to pay for lessons, but she couldn't break through the blind faith. Today, she might have a thing or two to say to the instructors who convinced her son not to go to the hospital. "I'd tell them they almost killed my son. He would have died if he'd have listened to them."
At one point, her son was seriously injured on the job and couldn't walk. The doctors released him to his mother's care, but after he talked to his Chung Moo Kwan instructor, other students came to her house and took her son away.
And my son said, "I made a mistake. I should not have returned to the home of my parents." And so, my husband and I argued with him, with our son, and with the people taking him out. But there was like a wall we were arguing with. They weren't hearing us.
Russell's grandmother came to see him. She was very upset and told him she had been crying and almost had a heart attack. Her heart would give out a few months later, and he lost her forever. Two of Keith's higher belt instructors called Russell at the hospital and said that it was unnecessary for him to do the push-ups, condemning Keith's actions. They told Russell that he didn't do anything wrong, and his opportunity to learn how to run a school was intact. Russell found this phone call to be somewhat confusing for two reasons. First, you never question your higher belt's word or actions. Second, he had seen many students do push-ups as a correction, including Keith. So why were they saying something different? Russell believes that at that point it was all about damage control and the possible threat of a lawsuit. To protect the school, they were willing to throw Keith under the bus. Russell would later learn from Keith that the push-ups were ordered by national instructor Jared. A few days later, Russell was asked why he went to the hospital instead of the school. He felt confused because he had gone to school and had been told to wait.
Throughout my story, it seemed that things happened to me for a reason or for a lesson that I would learn later on. Call it fate. If it were not for the injury to my arms, I would not have done the things that I did, or be sharing the story right now.
By this time in Russell's training, he would never question his higher belt's word. A seed of doubt would be planted this day. The Moo would tell students and instructors of miraculous healing powers of Master Kim, how he saved the lives of instructors when doctors couldn't. But when faced with an actual medical emergency, there was nothing they could do. They would tell no one that Russell was told to wait. Protecting the myth of Master Kim's healing powers was their only concern. Russell was in the hospital for 16 days, 5 with the muscles wide open in the back of his arms so they could drain out, before the doctors could graft his arms closed. Skin grafts were necessary because his arms had swollen to such a degree that the doctors were unable to close his arms back up without putting pressure on them. During the time Russell was in the hospital, assistants visited him each day. They brought in a VCR to help him pass the time, 3 to 5 movies each day, and also pizza and other foods, plants, a sweatsuit to wear instead of hospital clothes, and a Playboy magazine. Russell thought the Playboy was pretty funny, because he could not even turn the pages, let alone do anything else. One assistant instructor made foot-long eating utensils so Russell could feed himself.
I could not bend my arms. The only movement that I had was the ability to move my wrist. Not wanting to be fed helplessly by another, I asked for utensils, toothbrushes, combs to be put on long sticks. Think about all the things that you could not do without your arms, and that was the situation I was in.
When Russell was admitted to the hospital, he thought his medical insurance had run out after losing his job, so the school was finding out about medical assistance for him. It just so happened that his insurance was running out that day, and Craig Matthews, not the school, paid the premium. That would be the last time he would see Craig for a couple years. Craig had been questioning the MOO's actual agenda, and while Russell was still in the hospital, Craig quit training and moved out of the Lowry apartment. Russell got out of the hospital on Saturday, and by Monday was helping teach the class. His arms remained wrapped for 6 weeks. He could hardly move, so the other assistants helped him change into his uniform. He taught class with his arms crossed and had other assistants demonstrate the movements that he could not. The story that Russell went to the hospital instead of the school had gotten around to other instructors. They would ask why Russell went to the hospital instead of the school. Clearly, Russell was now considered mentally missing for going to the hospital. As a result of not believing in Master Kim's power to heal, it was presented that it was Russell's own fault that he was injured and scarred. Every time he heard this, his feelings towards the school diminished. He didn't understand why Keith wasn't telling the truth about what happened, which made Russell angry. He had called the school before his own family. He wouldn't let the doctors operate until the school said it was all right. He looked at the whole experience as another loyalty test.
I had just gotten out of the hospital and it was a Saturday, and all I wanted to do was get back into school on Monday so I could teach class, so I didn't lose my opportunity to learn how to handle school. There was no recovery time, no consideration of the severity of my injury. I could not even dress myself. As soon as I was asked why I went to the hospital instead of the school, I knew that I was being considered by the school as mentally missing. The MOO had just ignited a fuse of anger within me that would one day explode.
Many people questioned how doing this style of push-up could cause compartment syndrome. Russell himself would wonder. He had witnessed a similar reaction to the Chung Mu Kwan push-ups in several students and instructors since the beginning of his training, but not to the extent of having compartment syndrome. The Chung Mu Kwan style of push-up was evaluated by Dr. George H. Kramer at Park Nicollet Medical Center. A sports medicine physician, Dr. Kramer stated in a report that because of the prolonged eccentric contraction, which is known to generate more tension in the muscle and more potential muscle damage, this type would cause injury earlier than a regular push-up. There have been other reported cases of compartment syndrome. As recently as August 2010, more than a dozen members of the McMinnville High School football team were treated for compartment syndrome after doing chair dips and push-ups. Salt. Not too long after the injury to his arms, he received a phone call in the early morning hours. His grandmother had a heart attack and passed away suddenly. Russell called his instructor and told him about her passing. He instructed Russell not to come in, but all Russell wanted was to go to school and train. After the funeral, he was told to stay away for several days. When Russell returned, the instructor took salt and shook it on Russell, then around the school. He explained that sometimes the spirits of the dead can linger. His actions were simple precautions to ensure that bad spirits weren't brought into school.
I got the call about 4 a.m. that my grandmother had passed from a heart attack. I hate answering the phone late at night. It seems nothing good comes from it. I remember my grandmother telling me when I was in the hospital that she almost had a heart attack when she heard the news. None of us knew it at the time. She had a heart condition and she kept it a secret.
Russell's first-degree black belt test. In the fall of 1987, Russell tested for first-degree black belt. He was living at Lowry, where they had a backyard kennel for Master Kim's 3 Siberian Huskies, Tasha, her son Thor, and her daughter Alki. Tasha was the offspring or sibling to Major, who was Master Kim's dog at the Chungmu farm in Illinois. Being Master Kim's dog, he would be considered royal, and so would his bloodline. Master Kim would ask about the dogs when he came to Minnesota. When you heard that you were taking care of Master Kim's dogs, you might think, wow, what an honor. But according to Russell, it was nothing more than a pain in the ass. The dogs had never been properly trained, and they loved to kill any small animal they could get their teeth on. A moo assistant had very little free time, let alone time to take care of 3 dogs. The job would get passed on by higher belts, calling it an opportunity to take care of them.
Higher belt instructors in Robbinsdale were first given the opportunity to take care of Kim's dogs. But when they couldn't do it, the opportunity was passed on to us living at Lowry to handle. They pushed it off on us.
A kennel was built, but the dogs would escape. On the day of testing for first degree, he was told to go to Lowry and pick up a table for School B located in St. Paul. They provided an instructor's truck, but as Russell got in the old beat-up Ford pickup, he discovered it was a manual transmission. He had never driven a manual before, but Russell was not in a position to tell his instructor that he couldn't do this, so he drove this piece of shit truck to pick up the table. When he got to Lowry, Russell discovered 2 of Master Kim's dogs had escaped, and he had to find them before he could leave. Russell grabbed the remaining dog and drove around the neighborhood, hoping to find the other 2, and kept stalling the truck. His stress level was going through the roof. He would be testing for black belt in just a couple of hours. Finally, he found the dogs and tricked them into the truck. Russell was relieved when he eventually made it back to School B, but stressed just the same. For each new belt level, there was a fee that doubled with each test. First section test was $15. Second section, $30. Third section was $60. By the time you reached black belt, it cost $960. The way Russell understood it, for each degree of black belt, the fee doubled again. Test fees did not count towards paying off the training contract.
When her son started, the lessons were inexpensive. He was a devoted student, practicing Chungmu exercises each day. But as he progressed toward a black belt, the cost of lessons and tests increased dramatically.
At one time he came at the house and was trying to get a loan for $5,000. And we were, what do you need that for? And he says, for a test. And we said, $5,000 for a test? He says, that's nothing. Later on, it'll be $15,000.
A group that included Russell tested that night in the School B basement. National instructors Jared and Jordan, along with Paul Raines, sat at the table Russell brought. The test lasted about 3 hours. Parts tested in groups. Other parts, such as weapons and forms, they tested alone. Russell tested for black belt a few months after the injury to his arms. During the operation, skin was taken from his right thigh and grafted to both his arms. The scar tissue was rough and hurt all the time, especially as he moved through the forms. Russell passed the test. He had earned that black belt through blood, sweat, and tears. He had taken his loyalty to the school to the point that he was willing to die, believing that Master Kim could resurrect him. But after passing the test, there was a letdown. For the past 7 years, Russell was trained to believe that the ultimate goal was to be a Chungmu black belt. When he reached this goal, he would be stronger both mentally and physically. But in actuality, Russell was in terrible shape. He was 5'6", with a stocky build to begin with. Being an assistant instructor, he was instructed to gain weight to reach 200 pounds. They called it the 200 Club. They said that it was okay to have more weight as long as you practiced Chungmu forms and could move around. Many of the Chungmu higher belts from the Illinois area were overweight and would later be referred to as the fatter belts. Master Kim himself had a belly, which was explained as where he stored his power, also referred to as Negung energy. They would joke that a master outside of the Mu who practiced wrong developed a fat butt. One of Russell's sisters thought the school encouraged him to gain weight because, outside the school, being overweight was not acceptable, and she felt they were trying to isolate Russell. Between the injury to his arms and being overweight, he was in the worst condition of his life.
I was weighing 185, and Mason Holmes told me that he wanted me to get to 200 pounds, calling it the 200 Club. I think it had more to do with the higher belts or fatter belts in the Chicago area directing it. Our diets mainly consisted of Mountain Dew and cupcakes. By the time I stopped training, I weighed 245 pounds.
Ever since Russell left the hospital, he had begun to question everything he was being told. The instructors treated him differently. They asked why he went to the hospital instead of school, assuring Russell that the school would have cured him. He had also begun to notice people moving up within the Chungmu system at an alarmingly fast pace, from white belt to second to third degree black belt within a year.
There was one student that went from white belt to third degree black belt in 6 months. They said that he had a special type of mind, which many of us took as his wallet. The late night instructor practices at the Lake Street School, School A, were said to be intense. Murphy told me that one night during one of these sessions that the instructor's special mind broke, and he would leave the school after that.
Aden had once told Russell that a Chungmu black belt could not be bought and would take an average of 5 years to achieve. What Russell saw was a complete contradiction to that. The faster someone brought in cash, the faster they moved up. The pressure to bring in more cash was constant. They were like junkies, trying to get to that next level. He started to hear and see people do things that were unethical, and in some cases illegal, to get that money. Meeting Master Kim for the first time. National instructors Fred, Jared, and Jordan lived in a house in Crystal, Minnesota, along with regional head instructor Paul Raines, his wife, and 2 children. The first time Russell went to Crystal, he was surprised by the living conditions in which the higher belt instructors lived. In the basement of the home, Russell saw 3 single beds, one for each of the national instructors. He was always told that one day, when Russell became an instructor, he would be financially set and would be able to retire at age 35. Russell was paying $200 to $300 a month for lessons, but he saw nothing wrong with that if one day he would be making as much as a doctor or a lawyer. A national instructor always had a stack of bills in his pocket. Later he learned this was called show money. They always dressed professionally. Now, Russell saw that they were living in less than desirable conditions, not at all what he was led to believe. He told himself they lived this way by choice, that they were making sacrifices for now to help build up the school. In reality, they were under the same kind of control as the rest of the students.
Seeing how the national instructors lived was eye-opening and shocking. To see these 3 single beds lined up in a row made me wonder, if the highest belts in the Moose system lived this way, how would I ever be able to retire at 35? Where did the money go? It could only go to Kim. I hope that now that John C. Kim is dead, that they are no longer under his control, and maybe one day they can share their stories.
One night, about 11 p.m., Russell received a call from regional head instructor Paul Raines, instructing him to come to Crystal with all the chairs he had. The moment Russell had been waiting for, the last 7.5 years, was here. He knew immediately that he was about to meet Master Kim.
All cults have certain common characteristics. They have charismatic leaders claiming to possess mystical powers, secret knowledge, and promising salvation.
Russell arrived at Crystal. Cars lined the street. He brought his chairs into the garage and left them there. Entering the living room, Russell saw Master Kim sitting in the corner. Russell joined the greeting line with a few other instructors. National Instructor Fred would introduce Russell to Master Kim, who was not at all what Russell was expecting. The first thing that Russell noticed was his hair. Growing up with his mother and 5 sisters, Russell knew permed hair when he saw it, and Master Kim definitely had a perm. Russell had an image in his head of the greatest martial arts master who ever lived, sitting in a beauty shop in curlers, getting his hair permed.
For years, I've had this image of Kim, the greatest martial arts master who ever lived, in a beauty shop with his hair in curlers, surrounded by instructors with their hair in curlers. He could transform himself into any animal or person, but he couldn't perm his own hair.
During Russell's training, he had noticed instructors getting their hair permed and growing facial hair. Russell realized his higher belts were mimicking Master Kim. If Master Kim had a perm, then instructors would get perms. If he grew a mustache, then instructors would grow mustaches. If he spoke broken English, then American-born instructors spoke broken English. Modeling after the leader, in this case Master Kim, is not uncommon in destructive cults.
I am meeting Kim for the first time, and I'm noticing his permed hair and his porn mustache, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm surrounded by these men who also had perms and mustaches, and it was one of those aha moments. The instructors were modeling Kim.
One reason that members of the Mu may have seemed weird or strange to those outside the school is that every member seemed to have certain habits or mannerisms. Believing Master Kim to be the greatest martial artist that ever lived, those who followed him would emulate his every move. Master Kim sported a mustache that was not unlike a porn stash. He wore a gold chain around his neck, a blue Adidas jumpsuit, and snakeskin cowboy boots.
Growing up in the projects, I had met guys like Kim before. We call them jive talkers. Guys who talk in an exaggerating, teasing, and misleading way. The way he looked reminds me of Aaron from Awesome Asian Bad Guys. With the permed hair, the porn stash, the Adidas jumpsuit. The only thing that Kim was missing was the gold tooth, and his outfit would have been complete.
Upon meeting and shaking Russell's hand, Master Kim stated the injury to Russell's arms had not completely healed yet. Master Kim would pass on a martial arts form to help Russell heal. This was the second time Russell would be told that he'd receive a form that would help his arms heal. Master Kim made it seem like he had some ability to tell Russell's injuries had not yet healed just by looking at Russell, but Russell was not impressed. The injury to his arms was severe and would take several surgeries over an 18-year period to heal. The higher belt's demeanor was unusual that night. Normally these men stood tall, commanding respect and obedience, but in front of Master Kim, they were like subdued children. In honor of Master Kim's visit, the national instructors prepared a feast that included a lobster for each person and the biggest prawns that Russell had ever seen. The national instructors cooked and prepared them for lower belt instructors, which was unusual, but everyone there was in the presence of a king. Therefore, they would be fed like one.
The meal that night was impressive, and the fact that it was being prepared and served by the national instructors was unusual. To this day, I've never seen prawns that big.
After dinner, Master Kim did a few martial arts demonstrations. First, he demonstrated the use of a sword and talked about becoming one with the weapon. Then he stopped the sword just at the tip of Russell's nose. Master Kim was a heavy-set man with a bit of a belly. Master lined up 5 instructors stomach to back. Once they were lined up, he ran toward the first instructor, hitting him in the stomach with his own stomach, belly to belly. The force was powerful enough to send the last instructor in the back of the line flying. It was the same thing that happens with a tick-tock pendulum. Russell was shocked by this. It seemed like a bizarre demonstration, and he thought to himself, "Holy shit!" He could not believe that after 7.5 years of waiting to meet Master Kim, this would be the demonstration he was shown. It looked like a Three Stooges bit. Russell clearly did not understand stomach form.
For 7 years, I've heard the stories of Kim's supernatural powers and the ability to jump off an 11-story building without being harmed, or that he could appear as any person or animal. And now this demonstration that he does, running up to these guys and hitting them with his belly. And I'm like, really? Really? That's it? I wanted to see him turn into a tiger or some shit like that.
They were all told to sit on the floor with legs crossed. They didn't use any of the chairs that Russell was told to bring. Master Kim sat in the corner, while everyone else sat on the floor in front of him. Master Kim told them of the 1,500-year history of Chungmu Kwan and the 5 million members worldwide. He explained that the school had many names. One reason for this, he said, was there were many people jealous of the school, and therefore it was important for the school to appear small. As Master Kim spoke, his voice would be strong, commanding, and deep. He talked about living on Bow and Arrow Mountain, where he had to survive in the cold winter months, and how he stayed outside on a rock for 1 day in the cold to train his mind. He talked about living in a cave surrounded by tigers. He explained that it was called Bow and Arrow Mountain because, like an arrow that is shot up into the mountain and does not come back, most men who went up the mountain never came back. As he spoke, he would get even more serious. Master Kim was about to make his point, and in a deep, loud voice he would say, "Meanings," then go on to something else without making his point. He did this over and over again, talking in circles, sometimes in very clear English, other times not. They were all sitting on the floor, legs crossed, listening to Master Kim go on in circles, not making sense. It was very late, and their legs were falling asleep, their backs feeling the strain, but Master Kim kept going. People started to get dizzy and almost pass out. Master Kim would point at them and say, "See? Too much mind getting in." It was said that Master Kim could pass on his mind to you, sharing a little bit of his knowledge, but if the person's mind was not strong enough, then too much mind could get in and they would begin to pass out. Witnessing Master Kim putting people in this hypnotic-like state, Russell knew that Master Kim had done this many times before. As Master Kim talked, he made you believe that everything you have learned so far was nothing. The black belt was just the beginning. In order to have a deeper understanding of life, of Chungmu, and the meaning of true right and correct ways of life, you would have to earn your way. There would be sacrifices to make. He would break you down, and then they could start all over with you. The next day, Russell went to the school and, as expected, gave personal testimony to anyone who hadn't been there last night of the greatness of the movements that Master Kim had demonstrated. Like the good Mu that Russell was, he told of the glory of Master Kim. But at heart, Russell was disappointed by what he had witnessed.
There were many red flags going off the night that I met Kim, and the fact that I would return to the school the next day and speak of his glory goes to show the power and the control that he held over me.
Further disappointing, the chairs that he brought to the National Instructor's house would not be returned to him, and he could not ask for them back. In the school, Russell would lend tools to his instructors, and then was told it would be incorrect to ask for it back. The higher belt most likely needed it more than Russell did. They would tell you the only thing you truly own is your mind and your body, or in other words, everything else is the Mu's for the taking. After meeting Master Kim, Russell asked his instructor about the special form that Master Kim said he would show his instructors to help Russell's arms heal. The instructor told Russell to practice T-position. T-position is a mental form in which you cross one leg over the other, bending at the knees with one knee near the ground while holding both arms out. When told this was the special form that Master Kim said would be passed down to him, Russell was silently infuriated. The injury to his arms was akin to throwing a hot dog into a microwave and watching it explode. Russell could hold the position, but it caused intense pain that he couldn't show. T-position was no special form. Russell learned it as a white belt. It was sometimes used on students considered weak-minded, missing. Russell felt that being told to hold T position was a way of saying that he was weak-minded for going to the hospital.
To be told that Kim was going to have instructors show me some special form to help my arms heal, and then be told that the special form is holding my arms out straight, really pissed me off. You would hear that the Moo had special forms. What a bunch of crap.
Several months later, all the instructors and assistant instructors from around Minnesota met for a monthly lesson at School A, located on Lake Street in South Minneapolis. After the lesson this time, Master Kim arrived at the school wearing the same outfit, permed hair, and jewelry. Again, he talked in circles, never making his point, and again, Russell saw people start to pass out from trying so hard to understand his conversation. Master Kim had a chair brought into the practice area. He told them he had the power to make one arm grow bigger than the other through his mental concentration. Master Kim placed both of his arms over the back of the chair and said, "Watch my arm grow." He slapped his forearm, saying, "Do you see my arm grow?" Russell was nodding his head as if he saw Master Kim's arm grow, but in the back of his mind, Russell knew he had not. If Russell were to say, "No, Master, I don't see anything," there would have been hell to pay. They all answered, "Yes, Master." Master Kim asked them how big did they want his arm to grow. He said that he could make it grow as big as his leg. Many of the witnesses actually believed that they saw his arm grow. Russell would accredit this to the trance-like state that Master Kim had put them in.
Kim making us believe that he could make his arm grow was another bizarre demonstration. It reminded me of the film Big Trouble in Little China, where one of the three Storms had possessed superhuman strength and he could inflate his body like a balloon to deflect projectiles. It would not be a surprise to me that Kim took the ballooning from this film.
Again, like the good Moo that Russell was, he gave personal testimony to those who were not there, claiming that he saw Master Kim's arm grow.
Deceived will be taken next week off for the Christmas holiday. We wish you and your families a happy and safe holiday. Please join us when we return with episode 9 on December 28th. Deceived, the Moo Years is a production of Deja Moo, LLC. Recorded and produced by Alive and Social Podcast Network. Russell Johnson, producer and writer. Charles Hubble, host and narrator. David Bruskin, editor. Russ Meyer, co-writer and editor. Aaron Troe, sound producer. Brian Price, audio editor. Wyatt Sarber, sound engineering. Woon Tae Ryu is our advisor in South Korea. Authentic is our advertising representative. Deceived, the Moo Years is represented by Young Entertainment Law.